The early days of baseball saw a lot of characters, and the Pony League was no exception. Foremost was the manager of the Olean Oilers, Jake Pitler. He became a legend. An early yearbook referred to Jake as somebody who keeps things lively on the coaching box, silent only when one of his runners is picked off base. What he has to say when that occurs is generally muttered in low tones to himself. Most of the time, however, his steady stream of chatter and abuse keeps the opposing team muttering better left unsaid phrases to themselves. When Olean came to Jamestown, it usually resulted in standing room only crowds and a great deal of excitement. The manager of Jamestown during this period of time was Greg Malevy. His son, movie actor Greg Malevy, remembers those early days of professional baseball in Jamestown.
So nice of you remember this.
Oh, dear God.
Remember all those?
Oh, my God, there I am. Oh, Jesus, I was a bat boy, kind of.
You spent
at-large bat boy.
You spent a lot of time around the stadium?
Oh, God, yes. I was a stadium rat.
Yeah.
Oh, that's all I did. I lived to do that. And whenever he'd let me go down there, which was I begged to go to every game, of course, and I couldn't. Because part of me was in school at the time, and part of me wasn't. Part of me was at the park. I used to hate it when there's Elmer Weinstein. Do you remember Jake Pitler?
Yes, yeah. I was never very close to him, but certainly by name.
Well, I can remember my dad talking. They used to stage, and then when they get serious, plan to get increased fan support, fan attendance, to increase attendance. They would have arguments with the umpires, and then they argue amongst themselves. You know, Jake and my father used to go at it, and they would plan what they do and what inning they do this, and then the papers would be full of this stuff, and boy, the fans would come out in droves the next night.
So like a wrestling match, they were the...
Well, there was an element of theatricality, a little showbiz in both their veins.
Well,
I think some of that rubbed off. I remember him arguing, you know, and the veins would pop out. I thought, dear God, I used to get so involved. And even in the early 40s, I'd get so involved, too, because I was just a little itty-bitty guy, you know. But my dad would argue. I thought it was for real, you know, and I would get all upset. And he'd come back and he'd say, well, just kidding, don't worry, kid, don't worry, son. And don't worry, it's not that serious, he would say. He never admitted that it was an act until much later, and
Jake Pitler. Jake Pitler started as a peanut vendor at the old Pittsburgh Pirates ball field known as Forbes Field. He would occasionally take hitting practice with the Pittsburgh greats of the time, shagging flies on the thick green carpet of the outfield from the bats of the likes of Honus Wagner. Professionally, Pitler, who was a second baseman during his playing career, started with Jackson in the South Michigan League in 1913 and wound up with Springfield in 1933. During that period of time, Pitler played with the Pittsburgh Pirates from 1917 through 1918, and he played in over 100 games as a second baseman. After ending his playing career in 1933, he had various jobs in and out of professional baseball. However, in 1939, with the advent of the Pony League, an Elmira business manager contacted Pitler and asked him if he'd be interested in a field manager position in Olean. Would I? He answered. I was on my way before he could hang up the phone, remembered Jake Pitler. Hence, Jake Pitler's arrival in the Pony League and the creation of a legend. Jake was always baiting the umpires, often for reaction from the crowds. One of the great umpires in our area, Joe Nalbone, who umpired for over half a century, recalls an incident.
Beautiful day. He was coaching third base. You know, he had a lot of gray hair. Yeah. All right, I had a close play on first base, see? When the ball would beat a runner, say the ball beat him, then the foot, he's out. Let's say the ball and his foot simultaneously hits first base. I call him safe. Why I call him safe is because the ball didn't beat him there.
That's right, the runner beat
See?
him.
Well, anyhow,
Equal.
this particular time, to make a long story short, he was coaching third base. I had a close play where his batter runner hit the ball to the shortstop, and the ball just beat him there. Then his foot, I called him out. Jake Pitler was coaching third base. He ran across the mound over to first base where I was umpiring. He took his hat off, and he's motivating the fans now. He says to me, "Now, Bone, everybody tells me you're a good umpire. He's going through these gestures, see? I think you're a good umpire. Everybody tells me you got good eyesight. I think you've got good eyesight." He wasn't yelling like I am, see? So when the inning ended, well, let's say, then he put his cap on and went back to third base. So when the inning ended, the plate umpire, Frank Ballack, he was from the Canadian side, he called me halfway. He says to me, "Now, well, what did he tell you?" "Oh," I says, "he told me I was a good umpire. He told me I had good eyesight." He said, "What?" He said, "It looked like he was killing you." Well, that's the story of Jake Pitler.
The 1941 Pony League champions were the Jamestown Falcons. Bat Boy Jack Gallagher has his recollections of Jake Pitler.
Olean was a good ball club, and probably the best manager, in my estimation, who treated me the best, was one of the most hated by the fans, and that was Jake Pitler. You know, I always liked to see Jake Pitler come to town because he was good for a couple of bucks. He'd give me a couple of bucks when I'd bring him his towels or something. He was very nice. Jack Sanford was a nice guy, but Jake was just about the best, and I really liked him.
'41 teammates Johnny O'Neill, the starting shortstop, and Johnny Pollock, the starting catcher, have their independent recollections of Jake Pitler.
Jake was a good baseball man. Real good. He worked for the Dodgers. He was still working for him when I went to work for him. And of course he wouldn't go on the road, wouldn't go to meetings and so on. I'd run into him occasionally. And the Dodgers took care of their people. Took care of Jake.
Did Pitler put on a show for you folks here in Jamestown?
Oh yeah, yeah. He was into it every day.
Everybody wanted to sit on third base.
Every day he'd start something every day. That's what he'd bring for to start something. He didn't bother us.
Yeah.
We knew his show. And he was nice to us. He'd wink at you. You'd go into one of them tantrums. You'd work over. He'd give you a big wink. Jake was probably as good a baseball man as you could imagine. I mean, about developing ball players, teaching them the proper way to do things, and the personality. And he's had a real good father complex about it. He just all of his ball players loved him all the way through. If I had a ball club, that's the kind of managers I'd have. People like Jake.
He was an actor, really, but
He came here for a show.
yeah, I'm telling you, I'll never forget the time. He always carried a dozen baseballs on my side of the dugout, on my side of the dugout. And I hit a home run here one day, and he got a hold of that baseball. He said, "Oh my God, he didn't." He threw the baseballs in the air. He said, "Impossible." But he was a fine gentleman.
Thomas Weekly, the son of the originator of Jacobson, Weekly, and Olson, as a child was a large fan of Jamestown professional baseball. Recently, on a national tour, he stopped in Jamestown and recalled Greg Malevy and Jake Pitler.
I remember the name Greg Malevy, and who I think was manager at this time. And now my recollection of him is that he was a well-loved person, that everybody thought a lot of Greg Malevy, and I don't know, I can't tell you what he looked like at all, but I can remember that there was an aura about his name, that everybody was very pleased with this man, and we were very proud that he was representing our town as he went around the league. Then there was an opposing manager, coach, and I can't really remember his name, but it seems to me as though he went on to the Dodgers comes to mind, but I don't know who that might. Jake Pitler. Yeah, right. Now,
Bob and I were both sure everybody knew Jake.
You knew Jake Pitler. Well, now Jake Pitler. Now was he? It comes to my mind. He was either Olean or Wellsville, or
Olean.
Was he Olean? Yeah. Well, Jake Pitler. We just gave all different
showing himself.
Shades of hell. Yeah. And I can remember he reacted a lot with the grandstand and with the bleachers.
Oh, he baited the crowd.
Yeah. Did he? Oh, geez. I can remember, and I remember, and we would boo, and we would catcall him, you know, and he'd turn around, he'd give as good as he got, you know, and I can remember my father doing that. My father was really a gentle, loving man, but my father would enter into that, you know, and yell things out at him, you know, and boo and hiss and everything, and then he'd sit back and then he'd laugh, you know. And so
Jake thrived on that.
Yeah, well, I figured, you know, when I look back on it now from my maturity, that we were probably in an opera, you know. We were in this baseball opera together, and we were all playing our roles. Here we were all up there, you know. We were the chorus, and Jake Pitler was Falstaff or something. And so we were playing our roles, and we kind of knew that and appreciated it. And I'll bet when people saw Jake Pitler out on the street, you know, they'd say, "Hey, Jake, how are you? You know, when are you coming back to town? We haven't had anybody to throw bottles at for a long time, you know."
The bat boy for the 1940 Jamestown Falcons was Charlie Panabianco. This was the first team in Allen Park. And he has his own independent recollections of Jake Pitler.
Jake Pitler was a coach, and he'd wear his hat sideways and cockeyed. He was like a comedian, but he knew baseball inside out. He ended up being a scout for the Dodgers and a coach with the Dodgers, and that's where Malevy went. Malevy went when they moved to L.A. He went out west, and his son became a movie star. He married Meredith
McRae.
Yeah. That's how they ended up in California, because he went to coach for the Dodgers, Greg Malevy.
So Pitler, was he a showman?
Oh, God, yes.
Would he get the crowd excited?
Yeah.
How would he do it?
He'd kick the dirt, and he'd argue with the umpires, and he'd all emotions, and argue with the fans, but he was popular. The people liked it, you know. And it was a rivalry, see? You don't see that today anymore. You say one word and the ump will throw you right out of the game. They never threw him out, you know. They liked them. I mean, that's what baseball was. See? But it was really something.
He became the coach of the Brooklyn Dodgers in 1947 and remained so through 1957. Ironically, in 1957, a new coach arrived, and it was in the name of Greg Malevy. So for one brief period of time, in 1957, arch rivals Jake Pitler and Greg Malevy's paths crossed in Ebbets Field, which also was the last year of the Dodgers in Brooklyn. The 1958 yearbook referred to Greg Malevy as an infielder in his playing days, which began in 1927. He moved into the managerial field in the 40s, which included Jamestown, and joined the Dodgers organization in 1915. He has led Brooklyn-affiliated clubs at Elmira, Mobile, and Montreal, and has done a grand job of scouting as well. His addition to the coaching staff, which occurred during the 1957 playing season, placed at manager Walt Alston's disposal one of the finest tutors of infielders the game has developed. Greg would stay in that capacity until 1961. Yet for Jake Pitler, the highlight of his long and outstanding career was being a member of the 1955 world champion Brooklyn Dodgers. As Vince Scully said, next year has arrived.
To the last of the ninth, Johnny Podgers pitching brilliant ball, 1 out to go. Elston Howard grounds to short. Reese throws to Hodges. Brooklyn wins, and the Dodgers go wild as they mob pitcher Podgers, who hurls Brooklyn to its first World's Championship.
Not another word. And all winter, people said to me, how could you have been so calm at such a tremendous moment? Well, I wasn't. I could not have said another word without breaking down in tears.
That day was grand, boys. It was just terrific.
Thanks for the memories, Jake.
They were young men who had grown up during the Depression in cities all across America. When they came together in Brooklyn, they were forced to grow up in a hurry, for they were all part of the Jackie Robinson Brooklyn Dodgers, the first and most thoroughly integrated team in Major League Baseball. Hate was a persistent threat, but they banded together and won pennants and World Series, and most of all, hearts. They were a neighborhood team that became a national issue, and their spirit leaped from the field into the grandstand and affected us all. In 1952, Joe Black, a 6'3", 220-pound relief pitcher, joined the Dodgers. In his rookie year, he won 15 games, saved another 15, and won a pennant for his team. It was the only successful season Black would have in the major leagues.
When I was 9 years old and selling newspapers, I saw people standing around listening to the loudspeakers, the radio, and I asked this white man, I said, what are you listening to? And he says, the World Series. And I went home and I told my mother, I said, when I get big, I'm going to be a baseball player.
Anybody ever said that to you?
Yeah, at his funeral, lady, I was standing there over, and this lady walked by and she looked in the coffin, looked at me, looked in the coffin. She said, who you guys fooling? I said, what are you talking about, lady? She said, ain't no Jackie Robinson in there. You Jackie Robinson. I said, lady, my name is Joe Black. That's Jackie Robinson. No, it's not. They had to get the cops to get that lady away from there.
Really?
Worse, it had me a little nervous. yeah.
You started off with, first of all, I gotta go right to the one of our icons up in our neck of the woods was Jake Pitler. Jake Pitler was your coach. He was your first base coach?
Jake Pitler was the first base coach for the Brooklyn Dodgers. I know he was there in 50, 51. When I got there in 52, he was still there in 53. Jake was a integral part of the team, not only because he was the first baseman, but he would talk to players. Players liked him, because he's one of the few coaches that didn't have that aloof attitude about him. You could tease him, you could say things, and Jake would just laugh. I remember we were playing Chicago, they'd fly down Lakeshore Drive, and they'd yell out, Jake! And he'd look at her, there's the Jewish Navy out there, and he'd laugh. He said, well, no, they don't have enough sails on those boats to be our Navy. You know, he wouldn't get angry. You know, he would go along with the joke, and then you'd be there, and it's like my first guy with the Dodgers, I tell people I was the best batting practice pitcher going. They said, why? I said, well, they weren't pitching me, so I thought, and I said, I got fired from that job. Jake Pitler, after 2 weeks, said, Joe Black, don't you ever come here and pitch batting practice anymore. I said, what are you talking about? He said, you throw too many balls in the stands. I said, Jake, they're supposed to hit the ball. He said, not that many. I said, what am I batting practice? So Jake fired me as a batting practice. And I said, my goodness, come on, man. And he get down in first base, he used to say, hey, you got to base on my nice scoring. He said, but Campanella told me, I said, tie a rope around you. I said, why? He said, because you like to just run. He said, you're a pitcher. Don't be doing any running on me, man, because Justin will get mad. I said, okay. But Jake, he was just a good guy to have on the team. He's good for the morale of the team. If you lost the game, he would come in and have the empathy. But he says, hey, we can go get him tomorrow. And for baseball, he was a part. We needed him. Because at third base, the managers usually coach third base in those days. And so you look over there, sometimes you don't want to look at the manager. But you always want to look at Jake. Always he had a smile on his face. You always keep it. But when you lost, you could feel it. He feel the pain just like everybody else. But he was one of the guys who come over and encourage you. Because when you lose in the big leagues, you can get down. But Jake would tell you, hey, there's always tomorrow, and you feel good. So you guys who had an opportunity to be around Jake a long time, you're around a great guy, a great American, not just somebody in baseball.
Erskine from Anderson, Indiana, was admired by his teammates and adored by the fans. Erskine pitched 2 no-hitters, won 20 games in 1953, and set a record by striking out 14 Yankees in 1 game of the 1953 World Series. And he was blessed with the name that best suited the unique Brooklynese tongue, Oysk. Hey, Oysk, we're with you, Oysk.
Okay, there you go.
I have always had a sense of feeling about having a hometown. I'm born and raised in Anderson, Indiana. I've always been proud of that. In fact, around the National League, guys would often say, "Hi, Anderson." As I've been more active in the bank, then I've become more active in board relationships with St. John's Medical Center, Anderson College, YMCA, and those things. I don't exactly feel that I owe somebody something, and yet there's a debt of gratitude in there someplace that comes back to me because this town's been very supportive of me. My dad get home from work at 3:30, 4 o'clock. He'd walk home from the plant, get out the ball gloves, and I can recall one particular instant where Dad found a book on pitching. So he's going to teach me some techniques out of pitching. We're in the living room of our house, and my dad has the book in this hand and the ball in this hand. He's talking to me about pitching. And he says, now here's the way you throw a curveball. And you hold it thus, and you reach back thus, and you cock the wrist thus, and he's very into what he's doing. And he says, and you rotate it out and over your hand this way. And when he made that motion, he actually released the ball, which bounced through a doorway into the dining room, into a china cupboard, broke the china cupboard door, the glass, dishes. Gee, but my dad very calmly said, gee, that one of the best breaks I ever got on a ball. That's how I learned to throw my overhand curveball.
Well, Jake was one of those valuable people with young players. Jake was great with young players. He and Sukaforth were buddies, and they lived together at the Bossert Hotel, and buddied at night after the game. But Jake took most of us under his wing, and in a nice, easy sort of way. Never heard Jake get too excited. He really helped us in the early years. One of the classic stories is told by Vince Scully about Jake Pitler. Jake was a first base coach. He also was in batting practice. He handled the balls and all that, but he coached first base. So he's down there, and Jake was very enthusiastic. Now he's an old gentleman by this time, or seemed old to me. He's probably younger than I am now. But anyway, he was down at first base, and we're behind, and it's late in the game, and we're trying to get something going. And so we get a guy on. So Jake is exercising. Well, in those days, you only had a couple of cameras, TV cameras, so you didn't have all the coverage. So Scully is describing, he tells this story, the excitement that Jake is showing as a little momentum starts to build. And so now, we get 2 men on. He said, Jake is going bananas down there. He's jumping up and down, and here's this old gentleman, and he is spry as a young kid. Look. So now the count on the next hitter goes 3-2. And Scully, off camera or somehow through the network, they could speak to the director. He wants him to put a camera on Jake, and he gets this build up, and he says, now, the count's 3-2, and on the next pitch, Jake is doing leapfrogs down there on every pitch because we've got this thing going. Now we're going to let you see Jake on the 3-2 pitch, and you can tell whether it's a ball or a strike. So Vince said, now we got it all set. They zoom in on Jake. Here comes the pitch, and I guess it was a foul ball or something. And he said all Jake did was reach down and scratch his crotch. And Scully says, I couldn't say, don't look, or wait a minute, that's not what I meant. He said, what would I say? Yeah, I was lying. So he said, Jake really did the one thing you never dreamed might happen, but he said that's what did happen. But Jake was there for years and years, retired. I think when he retired, Greg Malevy was his replacement. Fine class guy. I didn't have as many years with him as I did Jake, but Jake had a good sense of humor too. We kidded him a lot, but he was always, he'd come in after a ball game in Ebbets Field. We had a big iron door, and when that door would shut, it would just reverberate. And especially if a guy was mad and slammed it. But we'd come in after a game and we'd be celebrating, you know, and Jake would yell out, "Forget that one, we got to win tomorrow." You know, he didn't want you to linger too long on the fun of winning. He wanted you to think.